welcome to this webinar from Kelso Consulting on how to build a fantastic business winning reputation. And a key element that we will be covering is having the communications strategy right. Firstly, to introduce myself, my name is Tim Priseman, as it says up there. I'm a director with Kelso Consulting. By way of background, I've been advising sorts of businesses on this webinar, and welcome to you all. There are some who are clients and former clients of Kelso Consulting, so you'll know all about us. There's quite a few people joining us who we haven't worked with, so if I will just introduce myself. So I've been advising B2B tech, SaaS, financial and professional and consultancy firms in the B2B and financial services space for well over 20 years. Prior to helping set up Kelso Consulting, I had senior PR roles in the big accountancy firms, and in the dim distant past, I was briefly a journalist. So I have 4 national awards for thought leadership and PR campaigns I've devised and helped implement. And I'm author of the book, The Thought Leadership Manual, an ideal present for friends, families, or if you are treating yourself. And I'm on LinkedIn. If you're not already linked in with me, please do drop me a line. So, what will we be covering today? Oh, I've just realised I hadn't been setting the slides to move forward. This is the problem with technology. So hopefully you can see the housekeeping slide. Anyway, all you missed, to recap, was a picture of me. So you've missed nothing so far, I'm pleased to say. So first of all, timings. This webinar will be finished in about an hour's time. We will be taking questions, certainly to be taking questions at the end, but if you want to fire through questions as we go along, then I will take them as much as possible at the appropriate time. So do keep the questions coming through. Can I also let you know I've got a microphone where I have to keep it really close to my face today. It's something strange about it. So if I rock back, suddenly it gets very quiet. If it's getting quiet for you, send me through something in the question box to let me know I need to either speak up or get really, really close to it. So I would appreciate that. What you'll be getting afterwards, well, actually, you'll be getting quite a lot afterwards. So firstly, you'll be getting a questionnaire to see how we've done on this. I'd really appreciate your feedback so we know what works and we know what we should improve. Very much appreciate that. That will come through straight after this webinar. On Monday, you will be getting a link. Via that link, you will get a recording of this as a video. You will get a recording of this as a podcast, so you can listen to it in the car or wherever you are. And you will also be getting the slides, and you will also be getting some useful templates and other information, including a reading list of things good books, good articles, if you want to dive into some of the areas we're going to cover in a bit more detail. You will also be getting a further 6 emails. Some of those will highlight particular bits we discussed in it, and over the next couple of weeks you'll be getting those, and some of them will be telling you a bit more about Kelso Consulting. If you do not want to get these emails, simply reply to one of them and say no more emails, and we'll make sure you don't get them. You'll also be getting a call from one of my colleagues, if you are not a Kelso client, clearly would like to find out a bit more about your business, see if there are ways of working with you. So please do pick up their call when they call. If you don't want to call, simply let us know again. Okay, does that sound good? Just to say a little bit about Kelso Consulting. We are a firm of reputation builders in the B2B world and indeed the financial services world as well. It's credibility that sells and reputation that opens the door to decision makers. The bigger the firm you're selling to, the more people involved in the decision, the more credibility and reputation matter, both to getting through the door and making the sale. We certainly help businesses build that reputation through various things and amplify their reputation, whether it is high impact national media coverage, speaking at events, articles and blogs, looking after their digital reputation, helping them win awards, and particularly through developing strong thought leadership, and of course helping them with their communications strategies. So, enough about us. What are we going to be covering? Well, first of all, the big question for you as a business owner, communication strategy, why bother with it? Once you've decided you should bother with it, it's how to create it. Most importantly is, having created it, how can you tell if you have a good strategy or a bad strategy? And dare I say, we do come across with the businesses we meet some bad strategies. Having got a good strategy, or indeed a strategy you're just going to have to run with, how do you tell if it's working? And a few tips on how to make it work really, really well. The first and fundamental question for you as a business owner, or maybe a senior marketing professional, is, why should I bother? Well, there's some good reasons and there's some really good reasons. The good reasons revolve around the sorts of things you would expect. It helps you make a strong message. The benefits from a strong message are that you're going to be able to get through the door more quickly. You're going to not have to spend your whole time explaining who or what you are. It's easier for people to recommend you, whether internally at prospects or your whole secret army of supporters, referrers, alumni, everyone who knows you and who could potentially put in a good word or refer you or recommend you. As a business owner, particularly, we've got a lot of SME business owners, you'll know about the day-to-day snafus and headaches of constantly having to correct or redirect things. Ultimately, if your communication strategy is clear, well communicated, there are a lot less of those, and it ultimately allows you to prioritize your activities. Indeed, you may find there's activities you're doing that you shouldn't be doing. This is not uncommon, and it allows you to focus in a busy world on those that are really going to help you achieve your big business goals. The important reasons, though, it's all about your money. It may well allow you to achieve more with less effort, less resources. If you're expanding, you're scaling up, you're worried about spending money, spending time that's going to be wasted. If you have a proper strategy, it allows you to waste less. But most importantly, it's adding value to your business, not just to the sales that are coming in and income, but more importantly to the overall value of your business should you come to sell it. Certainly all the research shows that when investors and buyers and trade buyers are looking at businesses, some of the most valuable assets for most businesses, and indeed in some sectors the most valuable thing that adds value to a business is a strong brand and distinctive value proposition. And indeed in research, which you may have seen in my blog recently from Kingston Smith, number 1 is that, and number 3 is a communications and sales process that works in a reasonable, coordinated and efficient fashion. So again, 2 fundamentally important communications areas that add not just make your life easy, not just make your business grow a bit better, but add fundamentally to the sales value, or the value when you sell it as well. So, importantly, how do you create it? Well, the first thing it's worth bearing in mind is, where does your comms strategy fit? The comms strategy fits immediately below your business strategy and plan. It is all about, at a strategic level, helping you achieve your big business goals by overcoming some of the hurdles around awareness, reputation, all of these things that fundamentally are important for your marketing and sales activity. And indeed, as your business gets bigger, or if you are a big business already, for other department plans, it fits, for instance, into what's going on in training. It's very, very important within recruitment. But for today, we'll be mainly focusing on the marketing and sales area. But ultimately, communications feeds into marketing and sales. A mistake many businesses make, and perhaps it's inevitable when you're a very small micro business, is they see their comms strategy as fitting below marketing and sales. This is not comms strategy, this is marcoms activity. We're talking about communication strategy today, albeit clearly they feed through, and we will definitely be dealing with the marcom side. How do you create a marcom strategy? Well, very much along the lines of what we'll be talking about for the communication strategy. The big problem with confusing your marcoms activity with your communication strategy is what happens with many businesses, is that it all ends up communicating very small sales support activities in a tactical sort of way. So rather than having big picture messages, you only end up with activity around tactical things, promoting webinars, sales, particular features around lots of areas. Now, there's nothing wrong with that activity. In fact, that activity is really, really important, and we do an awful lot of that on behalf of our client. But the point of today is, if you are missing the big picture, which we will come on to, what that involves, all of this is sporadic, bitty activity that, without a guiding focus, is pebble dashing and not building up a big brand for you. Does that all sound sensible? So what is a strategy? Well, a strategy can be different things. It can be a plan. It can be a pattern. It can be a ploy. It can be a position. It can ultimately ends up in a document, but your strategy is not a document. That is merely what where it is put down. But most importantly, a strategy is actually a way of thinking. It's all about thinking about the big challenges you will face and how you are going to focus and deploy resources to achieve the big objectives in a creative and distinctive way, and then communicating that so that people within your organisation, as it cascades down, can align with it, rather than either implementing it in an unthinking manner, which we all know causes lots of problems, or not understanding what's going on and end up doing their own thing, which again we know causes all sorts of problems. So what goes into creating it? And in the material I will send you, there are a couple of good documents that go through this in more detail. Perhaps surprisingly, these documents come from the government and not-for-profit sector. You may think, in fact, people who know me will know it's very unusual for me to have nice things to say about these areas. But the documents are excellent, and I will send you the links to them. But right at the top, whether you're creating a communication strategy for your business or the Marcom strategy earlier on, you need a statement of purpose. What is it you're looking to achieve in big terms? This could be a vision, it could be a mission, it could be the campaign objectives, but what is the big thing you are looking to achieve? You need to have analysed your current situation. Again, if you have a business strategy, which I really hope you do, you would have done this in creating them. It might be through a pest analysis, a SWOT analysis. If you don't know what these are, Google them, but I'm sure people on this will be familiar with SWOT and probably pest as well. You need to set out what are your business and communications objectives that you are looking to achieve. The important part is you are communicating with groups of people. These are your stakeholders. In PR speak, we often call them your audiences. You need to be clear about those and not have bland, generic ones. A typical problem within a Marcom strategy we come across is where people say all SMEs or all businesses in the whatever area, or every business in the market. These are far too vague and generic. We need to, and hopefully as part of your business and indeed your marketing process, you will have identified proper segments by sector, perhaps, geography, perhaps, definitely by position within the organisation, and hopefully much deeper into particular stages or ambitions or even personas and psychologies. But ultimately, the clearer you are about your stakeholders, the better, because first of all, you can craft messages which speak very much to them. You can have a value proposition that speaks very much to them. And then within your strategy, you need to be thinking and setting out how you are going to evaluate success. Following on from this, and I put them in grey, whether you would describe these as strategy or whether you would look on this as implementation, either way, you then talk about what are your key communications methods, your channels, your content. Are you going to be tweeting to them? Are you going to be speaking to them at events? Are you going to be targeting them through the media? Are you going to be sending them a quarterly bulletin of your best thoughts? Are you going to do videos for them? Are you going to do a vlog? What are your communications channels? And then a work plan, budget and resources. The outcome from this is that you should have a clear idea on who are your stakeholders, your audiences, your targets, and their priority. You have finite resources, finite time. Who are the key ones? What I say on this is often people don't delve into this enough. They say, we want to sell to finance directors. Everything targets at finance directors. Well, this is good as a starting point, but we know in organisations few decisions nowadays are made by one individual. There's a whole raft of other people, whether it is their boss, their reportees, their colleagues, other department heads that go into it. Even the CEO will be influenced by his investors, his chairman, perhaps his closest advisors, the people he reports to him. So think not just who do you want to influence, but who influences them. Indeed, when it comes to what influences them, it is first of all who influences them, but what else influences them? Are they influenced by particular people, particular types of media? What is it? Are they finance people, to continue that example? Are numbers and logic people? What are the right formats and ways of providing influence with them? Marketing directors tend to be visual and creatives. Do you take a different approach for them? Ultimately, you need to know what your key message for each stakeholder is. It needs to be simple and clear. No 5-paragraph long descriptions. Simple and clear. And what is it for stakeholders? What are the key things you need to be telling them? Have a think about what is it you actually want them to do. Communications is all about influencing opinions in order to influence behaviour. What are the behaviours that they will do differently that will show that you are influencing them with your communications? Is it they're going to pick up the phone and call you? Is it they're going to recommend you? Is it they're going to go to the website? Is it they are more likely to appoint you? Is it that they're going to invite you in for a coffee meeting to discuss things? What is it that you want them to do differently, and how will you evidence this? Some of those areas we'll look on a little bit more as we go along, or indeed we'll pick up in questions, so do fire them through. What I want to do, though, is the important area of having gone through your strategy creation process. How do you tell a good one from a bad one? Ultimately, with communications, you need to have a big message at the heart of it. This needs to resonate with the people you are talking to, and it needs to have emotional and logical appeal to it. Even those cold-hearted financial left-brain people I was referring to in financial directors' roles, they buy with emotion and logic. So does your strategy, does your message have that at the heart of it? Does it differentiate you from your competitors? Will your strategy and your messaging ultimately work in the real world? And very importantly, and perhaps counterintuitively, are the things you are doing, is your strategy not completely obvious and intuitive? The reason being, there are other businesses in the same position as you. If your strategy is completely obvious and intuitive, well, you'll probably find that it's exactly the same strategy being pursued by your competitors. If your competitors are pursuing exactly the same strategy as you, what is your competitive advantage that is going to allow you to beat to win and stand out in a crowded race? Another area I would particularly like to focus on, and this is particularly a problem where your communication strategy is ultimately becoming a Marcom's strategy, is you need to think very much about the buyer journey, and the buyer could be the end client, or it could be people who you need to buy into the decision. There go on a whole journey. I am sure most of the people on this webinar will be familiar with the concept of the buyer's journey. It starts with a latent need, it ends up with a buying decision, and indeed it goes on to satisfaction and either repeat purchase or recommendation. The more Marcomsy your communication strategy, the more it will focus at the end result or the end of the process, service details, company details, testimonials, low quality clickbait content, and credentials and technical details. Nothing wrong with those, they're all really important, but if you aren't also developing the relationships early on, developing the credibility, creating thought leadership positions and a credible brand positioning with people, all of these things later on are going to hit buffers as you suddenly suffer low conversion rates, because no matter how much people love you, no matter how wonderful your technology is, no matter how brilliant and cheap your service is, people don't trust you, whereas someone else has got in, probably with a certainly a higher value proposition, perhaps a higher price proposition as well, and has cultivated the relationships, developed the trust, developed the credibility, developed relationship, and got the sale. And this is particularly important when you are selling to enterprises. All the research, and I'll include some links to this as well, shows that if you want to be engaging at a senior level and getting in, you need to be doing the thought leadership, and that needs to feature prominently in your strategy. You need the big so what, the big value proposition within there, or the value proposition that is your big aligning area. So, how can I tell if it's working? Well, you need to be assessing things. Clearly the first bit is, are you doing what you set out to do? If you're not doing this, then it's very unlikely to be working. So, and I think most people will be familiar with the sorts of things you need on this. Are things happening? And you'll be getting lots of, certainly you should be getting lots of marketing data through websites and online produce all sorts of things of this, email rates, are you getting lots of press coverage, all the things. So are you doing what you set out to do? But more importantly, it's about, are you getting the outcomes you want, or indeed what outcomes are you getting? Now, people want a magic answer. They want to be able, able to say, okay, we got this, turn the handle, and it's an 18% this, that, and the other. Well, clearly it varies from business to business, from sector to sector, from product to product, and indeed according to the competence of the business, and indeed factors external that no one can have control on. So you need to be more sophisticated than just say, oh, Tim's going to come up with a standard example. But what I'm going to do is talk through how a number of clients have evidenced that their communication strategy and their communications activity is working. Let's go through them. Pandal, software as a service provider. Our role there very much to help them get and stay at the top of Google for the searches that matter for them by getting coverage that brings higher domain authority, higher Google rankings. Well, they know that the coverage is working once they started using PR to work in support of all the other good activity being done by their highly talented digital agency. Their comment was, all our boats started to float higher. They were watching what was happening on the thing that was important to them, the rankings, they're monitoring it, they saw the change. Nova Sector, by contrast, are a strategy consultancy. They were concerned that they were losing out to big names like Deloitte, McKinsey, people like that. They knew the communication strategy was working when their previous problem was that they were getting the meetings, people were loving the meetings, they weren't getting the appointment. The impact of the strategy, they were getting more of the meetings, people were loving the meetings, but this time they were getting the appointments, and this was in a 12-month period. Indeed, one of our clients who's not on here, accountancy firm, they were able to evidence the success of the campaign by going from never on the tender list for businesses that didn't know them in their target sector to always on the tender list for audits for, in this case, insurance brokers in the Lloyd's market within effectively a 9-month period. And not only were they getting on the tender list, they were winning the tender list, something that hadn't happened with businesses they didn't know. By contrast, a different client, they knew that the PR was having an effect, in this case, media coverage. Every time there was a burst of media coverage, the person found that there was a lot of traffic from interesting people to his LinkedIn page, and because he got the subscription, he knew who was looking and visiting his page. So for him, the evidence was people looking at my LinkedIn. By contrast, Neglect Assist, firm of solicitors, what they found, which was important to them, was that the effect of press coverage was, compared to before and after, more people. What happened was when people went to their website and went away, so what was typically happening, people were shopping around and comparing 3 or 4 similar firms of solicitors. The impact of the press coverage was, first of all, those people were more likely to return, so the increase of returns increased. And secondly, when people did return, they were more likely to appoint Neglect Assist. So it was all about building their credibility compared to other firms when shopping around, and it was evidenced by that sort of behaviour they were measuring through the website. And finally, again, it depends what you're looking to achieve and having a realistic understanding of what the buyer cycle is and where you're having impact. Yes, you can get off You can get people ringing up from press coverage and appointing you. But again, you've got to think, is this realistic within a particular campaign, the way the sales cycle works, and what else should we be doing with it? So as you'll see, a very impactful image of trains or a monorail going across Southwark Bridge. We were keen to get our client in the FT, so we indeed chose the bridge outside the or just outside, just along from Southwark Bridge where the FT is. We chose that image, it worked, they carried that image in the FT, and our client the next day got a phone call from Siemens, the giant engineering company, wanting them to come in and talk about it. Clear evidence, but again, that the whole campaign was aligned to achieve just that sort of effect. Okay, so we'll be tracking back to how to make it really, really work well. How can you make your communication strategy work well? And I want to go into a little bit of theory here. There is lots of communication theories, models out there, but typically they look something like this. You, the sender, are at the top. You have a message. You immediately encode that message according to all sorts of things that go on in your head, the language you use, assumptions, things like that. You immediately see this if you are talking to a doctor who will talk to you potentially in lots of Latin gobbledygook that you don't understand, they do. They've immediately encoded things. Dare I say it, technologists do this with a lot of jargon. Management consultants certainly do. I subconsciously no doubt have done this by inadvertently a couple of times by throwing in PR jargon along. So the first thing you have to be clear of is what you think you're saying isn't necessarily what you say. Ultimately, you have a message. It then goes through a channel. It gets interference, distortion, etc. It is ultimately received by someone who decodes the message. Again, they decode it in a way that reflects what they think they heard, their beliefs, the credibility they attach to the person and the channel it came through, all of these sorts of things. And then ultimately, what effect will it have? Will it change their opinion? Does it change their behaviour? Does it change their behaviour in the way you expect it to? Now, already you'll see that there's quite a lot of stuff that could be going wrong in a face-to-face encounter. Most communications processes involve this step-by-step thing being undertaken several times, like a big version of Chinese whispers. You encode your message, deliver it to the salesperson. The salesperson decodes it, puts it in an email, encodes it again. The person at the other end decodes it. Maybe they then verbally pass it on to someone else. What sort of messages are going to survive this sort of process? And again, here's another model of communication which looks at the sender, the medium, the channel and receiver, and all the sorts of things that have an impact, maybe to amplify your message, maybe to frustrate your message, maybe to interfere with your message. And we can think of some of this in process. So say you control the message, you put a message in an advert, you have lots of money, you put your message in a newspaper, you put your message in 2 newspapers, you put your message in the Financial Times, you put your message in the Sun. I would suggest that the same person seeing both of those will take a very different message from exactly the same ad with saying exactly the same things depending on whether it's in the Sun, whether it's in the Financial Times. So what sort of messaging can survive all this encoding, decoding, interference, misunderstanding, miscommunications? Well, first of all, your messaging, you need to be thinking big. You need to be thinking a big message that people will grasp. You need to be keeping it really simple. It does need to be aimed at the head and the heart, and it needs to be something that you are passionate about, that ultimately is really very relevant and clear in the language that your particular audience understands. I thought it would be worth looking at some examples from big firms, not because I think we should copy automatically big firms. Those of us who've been in big firms know all about the chaos and politics that goes on in big firms. And ultimately, maybe some big firms got big by being wonderful, but maybe they got actually big by cleverly developing and exploiting oligopoly positions as well. So we shouldn't automatically, in the SME sector, be aping big businesses. But at the same time, I thought these were useful. First of all, well, not just first of all, but particularly, because the one thing you can say about these big businesses is they spend a lot of time and resources on getting things right. Accenture. They say about themselves, this is effectively an articulation for website purposes of their value proposition. Accenture solves our clients' toughest challenges by providing unmatched services, blah, blah, blah. Now, that final bit probably hasn't changed much in 20 years, other than digital has been added in, and operations, they used to describe that as people. But it hasn't actually changed much in 20 or more years. Accenture solves our clients' toughest challenges. Is that something unique to them? I do not think so. But what's important about it is it gives a level of aspiration. It is straightforward for them to articulate, and they will have done a lot of research to know that their target markets of very, very large international businesses are beset by complexity, fear, change, all sorts of things that ultimately means they are prepared to pay an awful lot of money for people who will help them solve their toughest challenges, and Accenture is aligned behind that. Clifford Chance, one of the world's largest law firms, again targeting the same sort of businesses as Accenture. We put a world-class client experience right at the heart of what we do, and the world's leading businesses can come to us with their most complex challenges, not a million miles from Accenture. In fact, you could almost substitute the two of those. But again, it's something very powerful for Clifford Chance that they can communicate and align behind, that's aspirational for them, aspirational for their clients, and speaks to the problems that their clients are prepared to pay a very large sum of money to solve. McKinsey, the most renowned management consultancy in the world, famed for their alumni network and thought leadership. We help our clients make lasting improvements to their performance and realise their most important goals. Our primary objective has always been to be our clients' most trusted external advisor. Again, I do not see this as unique. In fact, if I'd taken McKinsey off there and put all sorts of consultancies on there, you would have found that pretty credible for them as well. But for McKinsey, they are able to align to it. They have the credibility of their past performance behind it, and they are able to use this as a distinctive value proposition that they can align behind. Concur. Whatever your business size, we can provide complete visibility of your cash flow. Concur, by the way, in case you don't know, are one of the world's largest software as a service providers, particularly in expenses and other travel management and things like this. Complete visibility of your cash flow. I don't know if they're the only person providing that or not, but they are certainly see that as a strong proposition. They align their services and messages behind that's attractive to the sorts of businesses they want to work with and the sorts of people in the finance and travel management functions that they are targeting. Ernst & Young, well, EY as they're now called, builders of a better world, highly aspirational message that flows through into all sorts of things that they are doing. Again, is this a USP? Could we take EY off there and put other organisations? Could we put Taylor Woodrow there, Bovis, other accountancy firms? Maybe. But Ernst & Young, through its communications, through its websites, through its training, through its other things, is aligned around a proposition that is all around an aspirational message. So, you have strategy. You have a big message that you want to align behind. That doesn't mean you're always communicating that message, but it's there, whether in the foreground and the background, guiding your strategy. You want to mobilize your strategy. And this is where most strategies fail, whether good or bad, is that they stay in really worthy documents that are filed in people's desk drawers or somewhere on the shared drive, and people go on doing what they've always done. As you'll know from the famous quote from Drucker, culture eats strategy alive. So how can you get people so that their behaviours deliver your strategy? Well, first of all, they need to understand the why. This is why we've talked about various things that you need in it, the proposition, the audiences, what we're looking to achieve, why we're looking to achieve it. They need to understand the why behind it so that when they're there on the battlefield, they don't just, and things are going wrong or differently or not what they expected. When push comes to shove, if they understand the why, they can behave accordingly. They need to understand your key messages. This is the importance of simplicity. They need to know the key messages. They need to be able to deliver them, whether it's in an elevator pitch, whether in front of your key prospect when the pressure is on. Can they articulate that key message? Can they live that key message as well? What are the proof points? Provide people with the proof points, provide people with the case studies, testimonials, templates that they can reuse. Don't just send an email round or stand up once at the away day. As important as these things are, think about a proper internal launch to communicate it, first of all, to the people you're reporting to, but think thoroughly about the rollout and cascade through your team. Ultimately, they've got their day job, to big strategies. Maybe they've had these things before, here today, gone tomorrow. Think about if this is important to your organisation, if it's important to you, how do you communicate that importance? Sending an email just doesn't cut it. It needs, if it's important, do it face to face. And indeed, for people, what training do they need? How does it feed into the training? Think about all of these things. If the strategy is that important, what are the things to make it happen within your organisation? How are you ultimately going to make it easy for people at all levels? So, in summary, many of you will have seen the quote on our website that tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. Thank you to the many people who filled in the pre-questionnaire we sent out earlier in the week. You will have noticed one of the questions asked various things about whether you have a strategy, value proposition, all of these sorts of things. Most people said they did not have these things, but at the same time they did have a program of communications activity. So what I would suggest is a lot of people are doing lots of things without really knowing if they are actually the right sort of thing to deliver their business strategy. So again, I think you need to think carefully, given you're already implementing timetabled activity for this year, what about the strategy behind it? Ultimately, your strategy needs to be about bringing clarity, focus, and priorities, not complexity and lots of extra activity. The big thing that people fall into the trap of when they're creating their strategy and indeed implementing things is, particularly as the SME owner driving much of this, you must say to yourself repeatedly, I am not the customer. You are not the customer. That is where stakeholders, messages, personas all fit in. Just because it works for you, it's very easy to think you are the customer. You are definitely not the customer, and that needs to be within your strategy. So ultimately things are driven by the customer, the prospect, the stakeholder, not by people, whether people within your business, whether people at the coalface communicating in a way that works for themselves. It is particularly important to remember, and hopefully this has come out, that comms activity does not just equal activity by your comms and PR team. There's comms activity, deliberate, implicit, accidental, all the time going on throughout your organisation. Indeed, one of the bits of research I will show you, which particularly applies to consultancy organisations, but I would suggest applies to probably everybody else on this as well, is that there are three in the consultancy sector. The academic research found 3 proven ways to change a reputation for a consultancy firm. That doesn't mean other ways don't work. It just means that they couldn't find evidence for it in their research. But the evidence from 2 professors at business schools was that the 3 ways were, first of all, evidence-based case studies. Now, they had some caveats around that, but evidence-based case studies was number 1. Number 2 was strong and distinctive thought leadership. And number 3 was partner and consultant behaviour. Ultimately, if people weren't walking the talk, no matter what you were doing elsewhere, it wasn't changing your reputation. I'm sure that resonates with people around not just their organisation, but businesses they deal with as well. Many people have fallen into the trap of saying we are too busy to create a strategy. It is quite the reverse. If you are too busy to create a strategy, that's the time you need one most of all, because what you will find is all the things that are keeping you busy are things that, on reflection, either you would do differently or maybe you would not do at all. Okay, So we'll be coming on to questions in just a second. First of all, I'd just like to say a little bit about how we can help you if you're going through this process. Clearly, we help organisations create strong communication strategies. This includes helping them throughout the whole process, or it can involve interventions at particular times, whether it is being an independent facilitator for brainstorms and creative messaging sessions. It's terribly hard for organisations to, if they're not used to these sorts of things, or indeed perhaps if there's a senior person, everyone's a bit awkward about speaking out, to get these to work well. There's also the problem with groupthink, where everyone goes in, jump on the first plausible idea, tick the box, job done, off they go. Having an independent facilitator prevents these sorts of problems, and certainly we help within that role. We help people where they're looking for an external perspective in the strategy creation process, again to stop groupthink or going for anything too obvious, or indeed not through not having challenged yourself enough to go the extra level with it. We're able to provide benchmarking of your firm versus your competitors. And of course, at the end, we very much help with the implementation. Okay, can I invite some questions? Okay, question. How do you target corporates, as I'm looking to launch later in the year a wonderful service? Okay, really good question. I'm going to assume you're some sort of startup, but I'll also come on to that if you're more established. So with startups, it's the key to business sales is trust and credibility, and the thing that a startup really lacks is trust and credibility. The absolute emphasis must be getting your first enterprise sale. Get that first enterprise sale. Once you have got that enterprise sale, you have the really, really important thing that a business, that enterprises look for, and it's not awards, as important as those are, and dare I say it, it's not analyst comments, as important as those are. It's a tangible named case study evidenced by a particular organisation saying you worked with them on this project and it went from A to B and achieved X, Y and Z. Your whole emphasis must be on achieving that. Where do you get those from? Well, it will come from people already within you or your business's circle of trust. These are the people you've kept in contact with on LinkedIn. This could be your former colleagues, former clients, maybe current clients in a different area. But it's people where you've got enough trust to get the meeting and persuade them to be your first client. Maybe it's through referrers, however you get it. But ultimately, if you can't persuade people you know to try the service you're offering, you're going to really, really, really struggle with people who don't know and trust you. The other thing with startups that they fall into the trap of is they say, we're new, we're funky, we're doing things different, innovative technology. Now, these things may well work well in the consumer area, but as soon as you say them to an enterprise, they are hearing risky and unproven. The last thing enterprises want is risky and unproven. Do not say these things. I know every bone in your body will make you want to say them. No, say everything must be aligned around proven and trusted technology that works really well. Yes to innovative, no to new and unproven. And we've got a webinar coming up on the other errors to avoid, the mindset problems to avoid when launching a new tech service. So make sure you have a look on our website, and with the links we provide, there'll be links to our other webinars, but do sign up to that one. If you're targeting enterprises and you're not a startup, well, going back to following the sorts of steps we've gone through, a clear, compelling value proposition must underlie what you're doing. You need thought leadership to get through the door. If you're doing proactive sales, yes, sometimes these things get tendered and people will find you, but chances are you're there as a benchmarking exercise. That's not to say you can't win it from these sorts of things, but if you're there making up numbers, it's for the people who already got their foot under the door to lose it, and sometimes they do, but again, it's a harder process than being the person who gets their foot under the door. Thought leadership also overcomes the catch-22 problem with senior level sales. The catch-22 is that senior people are not in buying mode, and they will rebuff most of your approaches. In fact, they will rebuff all of your approaches if they are not right. They are not interested in hearing from suppliers when they are not in buying mode. The problem when they go into buying mode, as we've already mentioned, is that they've probably decided who they want to use already. It's someone they've used elsewhere or someone they've got some sort of relationship with. So they rebuff all your efforts until they're receptive. Once they're receptive, they've already decided who they want to use. Again, thought leadership gets you through the door, having discussions, having the credibility, so that when they do enter sales mode, they've already decided that they'd like to use you. When we talk about thought leadership, and this is a bit of a spoiler for the one that comes up, but it's not a spoiler because there's tons more information in there, people often think thought leadership is being on a treadmill where you constantly have to come up with new insights. If you look at some of the firms that are particularly well known for their thought leadership, actually it's not the same insight. It's not the new insights all the time. It is the same insights and the same messages redone, repurposed, re-evidenced, but actually it's very much the same message, just presented in different, interesting, topical, different ways. And again, we'll be covering that on the next one. When you think, oh my goodness, thought leadership program, that's going to be really hard work. I'm a smaller business. How do I do it? It's actually more about getting something that works and flogging the hell out of it, rather than being on a constant treadmill that we've got to come up with new ideas all the time. Okay. Last call on questions. Right. I see that we have overrun our 1 hour time. So if you have other questions, send them through and we will cover them on the website and send you a link to them. Again, if you're listening to this for a second time, and clearly that's a good thing to be doing, just email me questions if they occur the next time round. Do speak to my colleagues about your questions when they give you a call. And I hope you have enjoyed this session. Hope it's proved food for thought and that you'll be joining us for future webinars. My name is Tim Priceman of Kelso Consulting, wishing you a good rest of the day. Thank you for joining us.